So here we have a lovely Fender Jazz Bass, a 2012 Japanese made Fender Jazz Bass. Fantastic guitar with some not so lovely fret buzz. It's been brought to me for a setup, so let's get on it. So, having already chatted with my client when he brought the bass over and checked it over myself, I've already got a pretty good idea what's up here. There is too much bow in the neck. You don't even need to use a feeler gauge or anything like that. There is so much bow. If you just get a notched edge and put it on the neck, you can actually see the curve really easily. So my plan of attack is to, first of all, just loosen everything off and check the truss rod functionality. I need to know that the truss rod will straighten the neck before I do any more work. The slight catch is it's a vintage style truss rod neck. So, it's a vintage style neck, so the truss rod access is bridge side. So I've loosened the strings and I've just eased it up to reveal the nut for adjusting the truss rod here. And first of all, I'm just going to double check how the neck looks in terms of straightness now that the tension is off from the strings. Now that's actually really straight. Suggests the truss rod is simply not tight enough. So I'm not going to do a great deal with the truss rod at this point. Just going to tighten it a bit. So we're going to loosen it first just to check, and then just give that a bit of a tighten there. See how that looks with the tension back on the strings. So for the strings, my clients actually asked me if I could preserve these strings because they're still quite new, so I'm just going to loose them off and just pull them out over the top and carefully thread back through the bridge. And now I'm going to use a fret rocker just to go over the frets in sets of threes and check there's no fret standing proud of the other ones. The way this works, you place the fret rocker over 3 frets. If it doesn't move, it's all good. If it does move, you get a bit of chatter and it rocks from side to side. You know, the fret in the middle is slightly high. Not so bothered about the frets towards the head of the guitar, but I am concerned if there's any high frets down towards the bottom. There's a little bit of chatter on fret number 16, so I'll make a note of that. You can hear that clicking. That's fret 19. They might be worth just filing down a little bit. This will be right with the other ones, just because they are right at the end where they could get in the way of a lower action. So I've masked off fret number 16, and where I've got the fret rocker at the moment, that is where the rocking stops. So I'm going to mark up to there with a Sharpie. And then it's a case. Just nice and carefully grinding it down just until we don't see any more Sharpie. That way now I've taken something off. Let's just check the height of that now. Still a bit of rocking, much less pronounced. Just going to repeat that process one more time. I'll check that again. Just going to knock the sides in. 600 grit sandpaper. I'll get some 1000 grit sandpaper. At this point, really polishing it. I'm actually going over more of the fret than I actually took down with this, just to sort of make sure there's no obvious difference between the bit that was already there and fine and the bit that I've levelled. Some 2000 grit to really get it shining now. Bit of steel wool. And the last check with a fret rocket. Yep. Like I was never there. Now we'll just repeat the process with fret number 19. Ooh. Slightly high just there. So I've spot levelled a couple of frets there, purely just so that when it comes to doing the setup, there's no chance that they might stand in the way of an otherwise low, nice action. So there's no chance that those frets are going to get buzzed against at all now. I'm happy with that. We're now going to move on to the cleaning and polishing. So the next step is to use some wire wool and just do the entire fretboard, get it nice and smooth and the frets nice and shiny and polished. But before we do that though, it's important just to mask up the pickups, because they are magnets and they will attract bits of wire wool like bees to honey if you're not careful, and we don't want that because it can seriously inhibit the pickup's performance. Now we just run the wool over the board in the direction of the grain of the fretboard. Spending a bit of time on each fret. Straight away I can see there was a little bit of wear on some of these frets lower down, and that started to buff out quite nicely. And now to add the finishing touch to the frets, we're going to use this Dremel tool, a clean buffing wheel, and some polishing compound. And we're going to go over each fret just to give them that extra really nice shine and smoothness. We will use a fret protector for this though, just to, or a fretboard protector should I say, just to make sure I'm not getting bits of polishing compound starting to buff the fretboard itself by accident. It's important not to spend too long on each fret because it does heat them up a bit and I don't want them coming loose. Just run it over. Try not to buff my fingers in the process. Quick rub down, and I can see straight away the small amount of wear up this end. The frets has pretty much gone, buffed out nicely, and that is one shiny set of frets. And now the final step before we put the strings back on the neck and sort out the final setup is we condition the fretboard with some lemon oil, just to be used on unfinished fretboards such as this one. Brings out the grain, conditions it, preserves it, basically makes the fretboard great. Just spread it on each one and then go and work it in with my finger and then wipe off the excess. Work it right in there because it's also quite good at bringing out any leftover bits of dirt. Just rub any excess off. There we have one perfectly conditioned and polished frets and fretboard. Just before we do get those strings back on, we're just going to give it a quick polish, mainly in the area the strings are going to go, that I can't do later. So now I've got the strings on, the strings tuned so it's under tension. I can see with my feeler gauge it's pretty much spot on 0.2 mil at the 7th fret, if not slightly less. Now it's possible that's actually a fraction too straight at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that for a second and set the action to where I think it should be and see where that gets us. But I'm aware that if it is buzzing a lot still, it might be that there has to be just a little bit more bow put back into it. But it's a bit of a balancing act this, so let's do the action. So I'm going to start by shooting for 2.5 mil on the E string at the 12th fret. We're actually lower than that at the moment, but as I said earlier, it's been done like that to try and compensate for there being too much bow in the neck. Just loosen it off a touch. 2.25 there, now let's go to 2.5. So that's on the nose, 2.5. Now I would say just doing that seems okay at the minute, so we can get G string around the 2 mil mark. A little high there, just drop that down a fraction. Now use a radius gauge to match the 2 middle strings up. There we are, that's one successfully radiused set of strings. So I'm pretty happy with that setup as it is for the minute. The only thing to do now will be set the intonation, which I'm going to do a little bit later off camera, but I'm not anticipating any major issues with that. You're still getting a bit of buzz if you dig in, but it's playing a lot better and it sounds a lot nicer for the minute. What I'll do is I'll wait until, I'll set the intonation and then wait until the client comes to pick it up, and I'll sit him down, and if he doesn't like it, if he finds it still a bit too buzzy for his taste, I will just tweak it on the spot for him and raise that action a little bit. But otherwise I'm pretty happy with that setup, and it's more or less done. See you next time.